The Alpha King's corpse had been lying in state for 3 days when Sarah crashed through the palace windows, glass shards glittering in her hair like a crown of shattered dreams, and pressed her trembling lips to his cold, dead mouth, not to save him, but to spit her final curse. The memorial hall fell silent. Every head turned toward her, pack elders with their disapproving scowls, witches clutching their useless potions, healers who had failed for 72 hours straight to bring back the most powerful wolf in the realm. They'd tried everything. Ancient rituals whispered in dead languages. Blood magic that left the marble floors stained. Nothing had worked. Damien Blackthorne, Alpha King, destroyer of her heart, lay as still as stone. Sarah's boots crunched on broken glass as she climbed through the shattered window frame. She shouldn't be here. She hadn't been invited. 5 years ago, Damien had made it clear she would never be welcome anywhere near him again. Sarah Thorne. Elder Marcus's voice cut through the stunned silence. You dare show your face here? She ignored him. Her eyes were locked on the dais where Damien's body rested, dressed in ceremonial black, his hands folded across his chest. Even in death, he was beautiful. Damn him. Get her out, someone hissed. But Sarah was already moving, her wolf surging beneath her skin, giving her speed. She'd come here for one reason only, to whisper her hatred into his dead ear and finally be free of the ghost that had haunted her for 5 years. Guards rushed toward her. She was faster. She reached the dais and leaned over Damien's body. His face was peaceful, unmarked by the cruelty she remembered from that last day. The day he'd stood before their entire pack and spoken the words that shattered her world. I, Damien Blackthorne, reject you, Sarah Thorne, as my mate. You are not worthy of standing beside an Alpha King. The memory burned like acid in her veins. I hope you rot, she whispered against his temple. I hope wherever you are, you feel every ounce of pain you gave me. But words weren't enough. They'd never been enough. Before she could think, before she could stop herself, Sarah pressed her mouth to his. Not a kiss of love or mourning. A kiss of contempt. Of finality. She wanted him to carry her hatred into whatever afterlife awaited bastards like him. Heat exploded through her body. Sarah tried to pull back, but couldn't. Her lips were locked to his, and power, raw, ancient, terrible power, poured from her mouth into his. It felt like her soul was being ripped out through her chest. The mate bond. The one she'd thought was severed. The one she'd spent 5 years trying to forget. It roared to life like a wildfire, and Sarah screamed against Damien's mouth as agony tore through every nerve. Then Damien gasped. His chest heaved. His hand shot up and grabbed her wrist in an iron grip. His eyes flew open, but they were wrong. They flashed between his natural gold and an unnatural, glowing silver that made Sarah's wolf whimper in fear. She wrenched herself backward, stumbling off the dais. Her lips burned. Her whole body burned. Damien sat up, confusion written across his face as he looked around the memorial hall. At the shocked faces. The scattered flowers. The funeral preparations. What? His voice was hoarse. What is this? My king. Elder Marcus rushed forward, but stopped short when Damien's eyes flashed silver again. Damien looked down at his hands as if seeing them for the first time. Then his gaze found Sarah, and something flickered in his expression. Recognition? No. Something else. Something that made her skin prickle with warning. Who are you? He asked. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. What? Who are you? Damien repeated, tilting his head. Why do I feel like I know you? The hall erupted in whispers. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. This wasn't possible. He couldn't, he wouldn't. You're joking. Her voice came out strangled. This is some sick game. But the confusion in his eyes was real. And terrifying. My king, Elder Marcus ventured carefully. Do you know where you are? Damien's brow furrowed. The palace. He trailed off, his expression growing more troubled. There was a battle. The northern border. The rogues were, he stopped, pressing a hand to his temple. That was yesterday. That was 5 years ago, Marcus said quietly. The color drained from Damien's face. Sarah's legs felt weak. 5 years. He didn't remember the rejection. Didn't remember the cruel words he'd spoken in front of everyone. Didn't remember breaking the mate bond and choosing another. Didn't remember destroying her. Before anyone could speak, the temperature in the hall plummeted. Sarah's breath misted in front of her face. The candles lining the walls flickered and died, plunging them into shadow. Then the voice came. It didn't come from any direction. It came from everywhere and nowhere, ancient and vast, reverberating through Sarah's bones. The dead is called. One life for another. Cracks split through the marble floor, racing outward from the dais in jagged lines. The palace walls groaned. Somewhere, glass shattered. The building itself seemed to shudder. What have you done? Marcus turned on Sarah, his face pale with horror. I didn't, Sarah started, but the words died in her throat. Because she had done something. She'd felt it the moment her lips touched Damien's. That terrible exchange. Her life force flowing into him, filling the void where his soul should have been. You brought him back, a witch breathed, staring at Sarah with wide eyes. But the balance, you can't resurrect the dead without paying the price. Damien stood on unsteady legs, his gaze fixed on Sarah. What did you do to me? I didn't mean to, Sarah whispered. I only wanted. But she couldn't explain. Couldn't tell him that she'd come here to curse him, not save him. That her kiss had been an act of hatred, not love. The bond thrummed between them now, alive and burning. Sarah could feel it wrapped around her ribs like chains. Could feel Damien on the other end of it, his confusion and fear and something darker, something that tasted like shadows and frost. Sarah. He spoke her name, and somehow he knew it even though seconds ago he hadn't recognized her face. What did you do? The palace shuddered again. More cracks appeared in the walls. Ancient stone crumbling under the weight of something that shouldn't exist. One life for another, Marcus repeated, his voice shaking. You've bound yourself to him. Your life force is keeping him alive. No. Sarah shook her head. That's not, I can break it. I can. You can't, the witch interrupted. Look at him. Sarah forced herself to meet Damien's eyes. They were still flashing between gold and that wrong, terrible silver. And she could feel it now, the thing that had come back with him. The presence that lurked behind his gaze. Ancient. Hungry. Damien took a step toward her. I don't remember you. But I feel you. Here. He pressed a fist to his chest. Like you're inside me. Like you're. Stop, Sarah choked out. You're mine. His voice dropped to something primal. Possessive. How are you mine? I'm not yours, Sarah said, even as the mate bond screamed the opposite. I was never yours. You made sure of that. Confusion flickered across his face again. I don't understand. The palace gave another violent shudder. Chunks of ceiling crashed down, and people scattered, screaming. We need to get out, Marcus shouted. The building's coming down. But Sarah couldn't move. She was locked in place, trapped by Damien's silver-gold stare, by the bond that now chained them together. What have you done to us? Damien whispered. And Sarah realized with cold, creeping horror that she didn't know. She'd wanted closure. She'd wanted to be free of him. Instead, she'd bound herself to him in a way that could never be undone. She'd given him life, and something ancient had answered the call. Something that now lived inside him, looking out through his eyes. The palace walls cracked wider. The voice echoed one more time, colder than winter. One life for another. The payment begins. Chapter 2. The east wing collapsed an hour after Damien opened his eyes. Sarah watched from the courtyard as centuries-old stone crumbled like sand, dust billowing into the night sky. Wolves scrambled to safety, some shifting mid-run, their panicked howls echoing across the palace grounds. The memorial hall where she'd kissed Damien, where she'd cursed them both, was nothing but rubble now. Everyone accounted for? Elder Marcus barked orders to the guards, his face haggard in the torchlight. Sarah stood apart from the chaos, her arms wrapped around herself. The mate bond hummed beneath her skin, a constant reminder of what she'd done. She could feel Damien somewhere in the western tower, his confusion and anger bleeding through the connection like poison. She needed to run. To get as far from this nightmare as possible. Sarah turned toward the palace gates and took 3 steps before the pain hit. It started as a dull ache in her chest, then exploded into agony that drove her to her knees. Fire raced through her veins. Her wolf howled inside her mind, clawing to get out, to get back to. No, Sarah gasped, but her body was already turning, dragging itself back toward the western tower. Back toward Damien. The moment she crossed back into the courtyard, the pain vanished. Sarah Thorne. A voice, cold and feminine, cut through the darkness. Sarah looked up to find a woman watching her from the tower steps. Elara Blackthorne. The beta's daughter who had taken Sarah's place 5 years ago. Damien's widow. She was beautiful in that polished, perfect way, blonde hair swept into an elegant knot, her morning dress immaculate despite the chaos. But her eyes were what held Sarah's attention. They were too calm. Too knowing. You can't leave, Elara said, descending the steps with measured grace. The blood curse won't allow it. What are you talking about? You bound your life to his. Elara stopped a few feet away, her expression unreadable. Ancient magic always demands a price. You can't stray more than 100 yards from my husband without suffering the consequences. Ex-husband, Sarah wanted to snarl. He's dead. You're his widow. But she bit back the words because Damien wasn't dead anymore, and that made everything infinitely more complicated. How do you know that? Sarah demanded. Because I paid attention when the witches were trying to resurrect him. Elara tilted her head. I learned quite a bit about resurrection magic these past 3 days. Did you know that bringing someone back from the dead creates a tether? The life-giver and the resurrected become bound until the debt is paid. What debt? That's the question, isn't it? Elara's smile didn't reach her eyes. What will the universe demand in exchange for a life that was already claimed? Before Sarah could respond, a commotion erupted near the medical wing. Wolves were shouting, and Sarah caught the word that made her blood run cold. Another one's fallen. They ran, Sarah, Elara, Marcus, and a dozen others, to the medical wing where healers were already gathered around a young wolf thrashing on a cot. His eyes had rolled back in his head, and his body convulsed as if fighting an invisible enemy. Hold him down, the head healer shouted. But even as 4 wolves pinned the male's limbs, his struggles grew weaker. His convulsions slowed. Within seconds, he went completely still, his chest barely rising. No, no, no. The healer pressed her fingers to his throat. His heartbeat is fading. It's the same as the others. Others? Sarah looked around and saw them. 3 more wolves lying in nearby cots, their bodies utterly still except for the shallow rise and fall of their chests. Death-like comas. It started 2 hours ago, Marcus said grimly. 4 wolves, all young and healthy, suddenly collapsed. They won't wake. Is it a disease? Someone asked. We don't know. The healer's hands shook as she examined the unconscious male. There's no poison in their blood, no sign of illness. They just stopped. Sarah's wolf stirred uneasily. Something about this felt wrong. Felt connected to. It's him. Everyone turned to see Elara standing in the doorway, her face pale but composed. It's Damien. His resurrection is causing this. That's impossible, Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. Is it? Elara stepped into the room. He's been dead for 3 days. Something brought him back, something that shouldn't exist. The natural order has been violated, and now the universe is taking what it's owed. You're saying Damien is killing them? Sarah's voice came out sharper than she intended. Not intentionally. Elara's gaze found hers. But his presence here is like a wound in reality. It's spreading sickness. Death. And it will only get worse unless. Unless what? Elara's expression hardened. Unless he dies again. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. That's not happening, Sarah said, surprising herself. She should want Damien dead. Should celebrate the idea of him going back to whatever hell he'd come from. But the mate bond twisted in her chest, rejecting the thought with violent certainty. Then more wolves will fall, Elara said simply. The choice is yours, Sarah. After all, you're the one who brought him back. Sarah found Damien an hour later in what used to be his private study. The room had survived the collapse, though cracks ran through the walls like spider webs. He stood at the window, staring out at the ruined east wing, his shoulders tense beneath his ceremonial black shirt. You shouldn't be here, he said without turning. I didn't have much choice. Sarah stayed near the door, keeping distance between them even though the bond urged her closer. We're tethered now. I can't leave. So I've been told. His voice was rough, unfamiliar. Apparently, I've missed quite a lot in 5 years. They told you about the rejection. Yes. He turned then, and Sarah's breath caught. His eyes were gold again, his natural color, but shadows lurked in their depths. They told me I rejected my true mate to marry a beta's daughter. They told me I stood before the entire pack and declared you unworthy. Sarah's nails dug into her palms. And I don't remember any of it. Frustration bled through his words. I remember the battle at the northern border. I remember rogues pouring through our defenses like a flood. I remember fighting beside my father, and then, nothing. Just blank space where 5 years should be. Convenient. His jaw tightened. You think I'm lying? I think you're very good at saying what people want to hear. The old wound reopened, fresh and bleeding. You were good at it 5 years ago too. I don't even know why I would reject you. Damien took a step toward her, and Sarah forced herself not to retreat. The mate bond, I can feel it. It's real. He pressed a fist to his chest. It's like breathing. How could I have turned my back on this? Because I wasn't good enough. The words tasted like ash. I was an Omega from a disgraced bloodline. Your precious counsel made it clear that choosing me would mean civil war. Something flickered in Damien's expression. Recognition? Pain? Tell me. Why? So you can reject me again? Tell me, he repeated, his voice dropping to that alpha tone that made her wolf want to submit. Sarah hated him for it. Fine. She crossed her arms, holding herself together by sheer will. 5 years ago, we discovered we were mates. True mates. The kind that only happens once in 1,000 lifetimes. You were about to become Alpha King, and I was nothing, an Omega whose family had been stripped of their titles after my father was accused of treason. Damien's face darkened, but he didn't interrupt. The council gave you an ultimatum, Sarah continued. Choose me and face rebellion from half the packs in the realm. Or reject me and marry someone appropriate. Someone like Elara, whose father controlled the largest beta contingent in the kingdom. She laughed bitterly. You chose power. You stood in front of everyone and told me I wasn't worthy to stand beside an Alpha King. Then you married her 3 months later. I wouldn't, Damien started, but stopped. Because he had. The evidence was there in the 5 years he couldn't remember, in the widow who wore mourning black, in the scars Sarah still carried. You did, Sarah said quietly. And I left. I spent 5 years trying to forget you, trying to break a bond that should have been severed. But it never really broke, did it? It just waited. Damien moved to the desk, his movements stiff. They said I loved her. Elara. The words cut deeper than Sarah expected. Did you? I don't remember. He braced his hands on the desk, his head bowed. I don't remember her at all. I don't remember our wedding or our life together. When I look at her, I feel nothing. But you, his head snapped up, his eyes finding hers. When I look at you, I feel everything. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. Don't. Don't what? Don't say things like that. Don't pretend the last 5 years didn't happen just because you can't remember them. I'm not pretending. Damien straightened, and the intensity in his gaze made her want to run. Whatever I did, whatever I said, I can feel that it was wrong. The mate bond is screaming at me that I hurt you, that I made a mistake I can't take back. You're right, Sarah said coldly. You can't take it back. Before Damien could respond, the door burst open. Marcus stood there, his face ashen. My king, you need to see this. They followed Marcus to Damien's private chambers, rooms Sarah had never seen and never wanted to. The space was masculine and sparse, with little personality. As if the man who lived here had been more ghost than person. Marcus led them to the desk where a leather journal lay open. The servants found this while salvaging your belongings from the collapse, Marcus said. It's your handwriting, my king. Dated the day before your death. Damien picked up the journal with careful hands. His eyes scanned the page, and Sarah watched as the color drained from his face. What does it say? She asked. Damien's voice was barely a whisper. The prophecy was real. I had to die to save them all. Forgive me, Sarah. The room fell silent. Prophecy? Sarah moved closer, reading over his shoulder. The handwriting was rushed, desperate. What prophecy? I don't know. Damien flipped through earlier pages, but they were mostly administrative notes, pack business, court proceedings, nothing personal. It's like I knew I was going to die. Like I chose it. That's impossible, Marcus said. You were poisoned. We found nightshade in your wine. Poisoned? Sarah's stomach dropped. You didn't tell me he was murdered. We didn't want to cause panic. Marcus looked haunted. We've been investigating quietly, but we haven't found the assassin. Because maybe there wasn't one. Damien's grip on the journal tightened. Maybe I poisoned myself. The words hung in the air like a noose. Why would you do that? Sarah demanded. Why would you kill yourself and then write about saving people? None of this makes sense. No, Damien agreed. It doesn't. A knock at the door interrupted them. A young healer entered, her face pale with fear. Forgive the intrusion, my king, but Madame Thessa requests your presence immediately. She says it's urgent. Madame Thessa. The court witch. Sarah's unease grew. They found the witch in her chambers, surrounded by candles and ancient texts. She was old, impossibly old, with silver hair and eyes that had seen centuries pass. When she looked at Damien, those ancient eyes filled with sorrow. You stupid, noble fool, she said softly. What have you done? You know something. Damien's voice was hard. Tell me. Thessa gestured to the text spread across her table. I've spent 3 days trying to understand why every resurrection ritual failed. Why no magic could bring you back. She looked at Sarah. Until she kissed you. Until true mate's blood touched your lips. What does that mean? Sarah asked. It means your death was special, Alpha King. Thessa's expression was grave. You weren't just poisoned. You were sacrificed. There's a difference. Sacrificed for what? I don't know yet. But I do know this, when you died, something was sealed away. Some great darkness that threatened this realm. Your death was the key that locked the door. Sarah's blood ran cold. And his resurrection? Has opened it again. Thessa's voice dropped to barely a whisper. Whatever you died to stop is now free. And it's coming. The candles flickered. The temperature dropped. And somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, a sound of pure terror. The wolves falling into comas, Sarah breathed. It's not because of Damien's resurrection. It's because of what's coming through. Yes. Thessa looked at them both with ancient, knowing eyes. Damien died to save you all. And Sarah brought him back, breaking the seal. Now something dark and hungry has been unleashed, and it won't stop until it claims what it's owed. What is it owed? Damien demanded. Thessa's answer was simple and terrible, everything. The palace shuddered. Not from collapse this time, but from something worse. Something that felt like a heartbeat, massive and wrong and getting closer. Sarah met Damien's eyes across the room. 5 years of hatred and pain stood between them. 5 years of unanswered questions and broken promises. But the mate bond thrummed with certainty, and Sarah realized with sinking dread that she had a choice to make. Help the man who destroyed her, or let him face the darkness alone. Either way, they were both damned. Chapter 3. Dawn broke over the palace like a wound, all blood-red and bruised purple. Sarah hadn't slept. Neither had Damien. They'd spent the night in Thessa's chambers, poring over ancient texts and prophecies, searching for answers that seemed to slip further away with each turning page. By morning, 2 more wolves had fallen into comas. 7 total now, their bodies lined up in the medical wing like corpses waiting for burial. Except they weren't dead. Not yet. Their chests rose and fell with shallow breaths, their hearts beat faint and slow, but they were trapped somewhere between life and death. Just like Damien had been 3 days ago. Here. Damien pushed a cup of tea across the table toward Sarah. His fingers brushed hers, and the mate bond flared so hot she jerked back. The touch had lasted less than a second, but Sarah's skin burned where they'd connected. The bond was getting worse. Stronger. More insistent. Every accidental brush of skin, every shared glance, every breath of air between them felt like standing too close to a fire. We need to visit the coma victims, Sarah said, ignoring the tea. Talk to their families. Find out if there's a pattern. Agreed. Damien's voice was rough from exhaustion. He'd changed into simple black pants and a shirt, abandoning the ceremonial clothes. It made him look more human. More like the man she'd fallen in love with before everything turned to ash. Marcus is coordinating interviews, but I want to see them myself. Then let's go. Sarah stood, putting distance between them. The bond protested, pulling at her ribs like a rope trying to drag her back. Damien noticed. Of course he noticed. How bad is it? What? The pain. When we're apart. His gold eyes held hers. I can feel it too. Like something's trying to rip me in half. Sarah's jaw tightened. We need to focus on the wolves who are dying, not on, she gestured vaguely between them. This is a mate bond, Sarah. You can't just ignore it. Watch me. She walked out before he could respond, but she heard his footsteps following. Always following. Because he had no choice. Because she'd bound him to her with a kiss meant to curse, not save. The universe had a twisted sense of humor. The medical wing smelled like herbs and death. Sarah moved between the cots, studying each unconscious wolf while their families watched with hollow, desperate eyes. All 7 victims were young, none older than 25. All had been healthy before the collapse. And all had one thing in common. They were all at the memorial service, Sarah said quietly to Damien. Every single one of them was in that hall when I kissed you. Damien's expression darkened. Then it is connected to my resurrection. Or to what came back with you. Sarah remembered the silver flash in his eyes, the dark voice that had echoed through the palace. One life for another. The dead is called. A sob drew their attention. A mother clutched her son's limp hand, her body shaking with grief. Please, she begged, looking up at Damien. Please save him. You're the Alpha King. You're supposed to protect us. The words hit Damien like a physical blow. Sarah watched guilt and anguish cross his face, watched him kneel beside the woman and take her trembling hands in his. I will find out what's causing this, he promised, his voice thick with emotion. I swear to you, I will save your son. It was the kind of moment that should have melted Sarah's anger. Should have reminded her why she'd loved him once. But all she could think was, you made promises before. And you broke every single one. They left the medical wing in silence. Sarah's mind churned with possibilities, with pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit. 7 wolves. All at the memorial. All young and strong. What had they seen that others hadn't? What had they? The poison. Sarah stopped walking. Damien turned to face her, confusion in his eyes. What? You said you were poisoned. Nightshade. Sarah's thoughts raced. But nightshade affects everyone. It doesn't discriminate. So why did it kill you specifically? Understanding dawned on Damien's face. Because it wasn't just nightshade. No. Sarah started walking again, faster now, toward the archives. It was something designed to kill an alpha. Something rare and specific. They found Marcus already in the archives, surrounded by dusty tomes and medical journals. He looked up as they entered, his expression grim. I've been researching toxins, he said without preamble. The healers found traces of nightshade in your wine, my king, but you're right, nightshade alone wouldn't have killed you. Your alpha healing should have neutralized it within hours. So what else was in the wine? Damien demanded. Marcus pulled out a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. There's only one poison that specifically targets alpha bloodlines. It's called Lunar's Bane. Made from moonflower petals mixed with silver dust and the venom of a shadow viper. Shadow vipers have been extinct for decades, Sarah said. Exactly. Marcus's voice dropped. Which means whoever poisoned you had access to incredibly rare ingredients. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. This was planned. Carefully. Sarah's stomach twisted. Who had access to Damien's wine the night he died? That's what I've been trying to determine. Marcus flipped through a stack of papers. The servants who prepared the wine have all been questioned. None show signs of deception. But there was a private dinner that night. Just the Alpha King and, he hesitated. Ilara, Damien finished, his voice flat. Yes, my king. Silence filled the archives. Sarah's mind raced. Ilara, who had been suspiciously calm about Damien's resurrection. Ilara, who knew about the blood curse binding Sarah to Damien. Ilara, who had suggested that Damien should die again to stop the spreading sickness. She wouldn't, Damien said, but doubt crept into his voice. Why would she kill her own husband? I don't know. Sarah met his eyes. But we need to find out. Before they could discuss further, Sarah's vision suddenly blurred. The archives faded, replaced by a memory that slammed into her with the force of a tidal wave. She was standing in the moonlit gardens behind the palace, her heart racing. 3 months had passed since the rejection. 3 months since Damien had married Ilara. 3 months of agony. And yet here he was, emerging from the shadows, his face desperate. Sarah. You shouldn't be here. But she didn't move away when he reached for her. I can't stay away from you. His hands framed her face, and the mate bonds sang between them. I made a mistake. The worst mistake of my life. You married her. I had to. The council, the packs were ready to go to war. Thousands would have died. Pain filled his eyes. But I never stopped loving you. I never will. Then what are we doing here? Running away. Damien pulled a small bag from his coat. I have money. Resources. We can leave tonight. Go somewhere no one will find us. Hope and fear warred in Sarah's chest. You would abandon your throne? Your pack? For you? Damien's voice broke. Yes. 1,000 times yes. The memory shattered like glass. Sarah gasped, stumbling backward. Her hand shot out to steady herself against the wall, her heart hammering. Sarah? Damien was beside her instantly, his hand on her arm. What's wrong? I remembered. Her voice came out strangled. We met in secret. After the rejection. You wanted to run away together. Damien's face went pale. When? I don't know. Months after you married Alara. Sarah's mind spun. Why don't I remember this? It's like the memory was locked away, and now it's coming back, Damien finished. His eyes had gone distant, unfocused. I'm remembering too. Fragments. Pieces. What do you see? A hooded figure in the gardens. Late at night. Damien's breathing quickened. They're holding something. A silver blade. And there's a voice. He stopped, his face draining of color. Whose voice? Alara's. Damien's hands clenched into fists. She's saying. It's the only way. The archives felt suddenly cold. Sarah and Damien stared at each other, the implications crashing down like falling stone. She knew, Sarah whispered. She knew about us meeting in secret. And she did something. Damien pressed his palms to his temples. I can't see what. The memory is just out of reach. We need to talk to Thessa. Marcus's voice cut through their shock. If your memories are returning, there might have been a spell. Something to make you forget. Before they could move, pain exploded through Sarah's chest. She cried out, doubling over as the mate bond twisted like a knife in her ribs. Across from her, Damien made a choked sound and collapsed to his knees. What's happening? Marcus rushed to support Damien. The bond, Sarah gasped. It's burning. Thessa's warning echoed in her mind. His resurrection has violated the natural order. But this was more than that. This was the bond itself turning against them, tearing them apart from the inside. Damien reached for her, and the moment their hands touched, the pain vanished. They stayed like that, fingers intertwined, breathing hard. The relief was immediate and total. But Sarah could feel the truth in the way the bond thrummed between them. We can't be apart, she said quietly. Not anymore. The bond is getting stronger, and every separation hurts worse than the last. But every moment together strengthens the curse. Damien's voice was rough. Thessa said our souls are literally tearing each other apart. I know. They were trapped. Together meant death. Apart meant agony. There was no winning. No escape. Marcus cleared his throat uncomfortably. Perhaps you should rest. Together. Until we can find a solution. Sarah wanted to argue, but the bond wouldn't let her. Already it was pulling at her, demanding closeness, demanding contact. She could feel Damien's heartbeat as if it were her own, could sense his exhaustion and pain and the terrible hunger the bond created. Fine, she said through gritted teeth. But we're still investigating Alara. Agreed. Damien stood, still holding her hand. He couldn't seem to let go. Neither could she. They ended up in a small sitting room adjacent to Damien's chambers. It was neutral territory, not his bedroom, not her space. Just a room with a couch and chairs and a fireplace that crackled softly. Sarah sat on one end of the couch. Damien sat on the other. The distance was barely 3 feet, but the bond settled, satisfied. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Damien said quietly, I never stopped loving you. Sarah's hands clenched in her lap. Don't. It's true. I don't remember the last 5 years, but I remember the years before. I remember falling in love with you. I remember thinking I'd found something I didn't deserve. His voice dropped. And I remember the terror when the council gave me that ultimatum. Choose you and watch the kingdom burn. Or sacrifice my happiness to save thousands of lives. So you chose duty. I chose wrong. Damien's gold eyes found hers. Every day with Alara was torture. Every night I lay awake thinking about you. Wondering where you were. If you hated me. He laughed bitterly. And apparently, I couldn't even stay away. I was planning to run away with you. But you didn't. Sarah's voice cracked. We never ran away. So what happened? Why did you stay? I don't know. But I'm going to find out. The sitting room door opened. Alara stood in the doorway, elegant as always in a deep blue dress. Her eyes took in the scene, Sarah and Damien on the couch, the careful distance between them, the way they both looked guilty. Am I interrupting? Alara's voice was cool. Yes, Sarah said. No, Damien said at the same time. He stood, putting more distance between himself and Sarah. The bond protested, but didn't hurt. Not yet. We need to talk to you about the night I died. Something flickered in Alara's expression. Of course. Though I've told the investigators everything I know. Tell us again. Damien's voice held an alpha command. What happened that night? Alara moved into the room with practiced grace. We had a private dinner, as we did most evenings. You seemed distracted. Troubled. You drank wine, more than usual, and retired early. Her voice softened. I found you the next morning. You were already gone. Did you notice anything unusual about the wine? Sarah asked. Alara's eyes narrowed slightly. Why would I? Because your husband was poisoned with a rare toxin that only affects alpha bloodlines. Sarah stood, facing Alara across the room. A toxin that requires ingredients that haven't been available for decades. Someone with significant resources and knowledge planned his murder. And you think I did it? Alara's laugh was sharp. Why would I kill my own husband? That's what we're trying to figure out. Maybe because you were never really his wife, Damien said quietly. Maybe because you knew he was still in love with Sarah. Alara's composure cracked. Just for a moment, but Sarah saw it, a flash of rage quickly controlled. Love? Is that what you call secret meetings in gardens? Planning to abandon your throne, your pack, your responsibilities? She turned to Damien. I saved you from making the biggest mistake of your life. The room fell silent. What did you do? Damien's voice was deadly soft. Alara seemed to realize she'd said too much. Her expression smoothed into careful neutrality. I did what any wife would do. I protected my marriage. By murdering me? By making you forget. Alara's eyes glittered. There's a spell. Ancient magic that can erase memories, reshape them. I had Thessa perform it on both of you. She removed every memory of your secret meetings, of your plans to run away. I made you forget you ever loved each other after the rejection. Sarah felt like she'd been punched in the chest. Thessa helped you? Thessa follows the orders of the Alpha King's wife. Alara's voice hardened. And I did it for the good of the pack. You would have destroyed everything, the alliances, the peace, the stability, all for a mate bond that should never have existed. That wasn't your choice to make, Damien growled. Wasn't it? Alara stepped closer. I gave you 5 years of peace. 5 years where you didn't pine for an omega from a disgraced bloodline. 5 years where you ruled effectively without the distraction of a bond that was tearing you apart. She smiled, cold and satisfied. You should be thanking me. Sarah's wolf surged forward, and it took everything in her not to shift and tear Alara's throat out. You had no right. I had every right. I was his wife. Ilara's hand moved to her stomach in a gesture that was clearly deliberate. And I'm carrying his child. The heir to the throne. The words hung in the air like a bomb. Damien went very still. What? I'm pregnant. Ilara's voice softened, became almost gentle. I found out the day you died. Our child, your child, is growing inside me. And you want to throw that away for her? Sarah's wolf stopped snarling. Something was wrong. Very wrong. She could smell it, a discordant note beneath Ilara's perfume, beneath her carefully constructed facade. She was lying. You're not pregnant with his child, Sarah said quietly. Ilara's eyes flashed. How dare you? I can smell it. The lie. Sarah moved closer, her wolf senses sharp and certain. That child isn't Damien's. I don't know whose it is, but not his. The color drained from Ilara's face. Is it true? Damien's voice was soft. Dangerous. Of course not. She's just. Is. It. True. Ilara's composure shattered completely. You were never really mine. Even with the spell, even with the memories gone, you still looked at me like I was a stranger. 5 years, and you never truly let me in. Tears streamed down her face. So yes, I found comfort elsewhere. And yes, this child isn't yours. But I would have raised it as yours. I would have given you an heir, given the pack stability. Get out. Damien's voice was ice. Damien. Get out. The alpha command in his voice made everyone in the room freeze. Even Sarah felt the compulsion to submit. Ilara's wolf forced her to obey, and she fled from the room without another word. Silence fell like snow. Sarah and Damien stared at each other across the wreckage of revealed truths. 5 years stolen. Memories erased. Plans destroyed. All because Ilara had decided their love was inconvenient. I would have run away with you, Damien said softly. If she hadn't interfered. I was ready to give up everything. But you didn't. Sarah's voice broke. And I don't know if that makes it better or worse. Before either could speak again, the sitting room door burst open. A figure stood in the doorway, tall, dark-haired, with eyes the same shade of amber as Sarah's. Sarah's heart stopped. Uncle Matthias? Matthias Thorne, disgraced brother of Sarah's dead father, stepped into the room. He looked older than she remembered, weathered by years of exile. But his eyes held the same sharp intelligence they always had. Hello, little wolf. His voice was grave. I heard you'd done something monumentally stupid. How did you? News travels fast in the shadow territories. Matthias's gaze moved to Damien, assessment and wariness in his expression. Alpha King. Back from the dead, I see. Who are you? Damien demanded. Someone who knows more about resurrection magic than anyone in this palace. Matthias moved to the fireplace, his movements careful. And someone who's come to deliver a warning you both need to hear. What warning? Sarah asked. Matthias turned to face them, and his expression was grave. The moon goddess doesn't grant miracles. She grants tests. He looked between Sarah and Damien. And you're both failing. The fire crackled. Outside, another wolf howled, the 9th victim falling to the strange coma plague. And Sarah realized with sinking certainty that they were running out of time. Chapter 4. Matthias didn't sit. He paced the sitting room like a caged wolf, his presence filling the space with tension that made Sarah's skin prickle. Do you know what a fated catastrophe is? He asked without preamble. Sarah and Damien exchanged glances. No, Damien said. Of course you don't. The council has spent centuries erasing them from history. Matthias stopped pacing, his amber eyes, so like Sarah's, burning with intensity. Once every 1,000 years, the moon goddess creates a mate bond so powerful it transcends natural law. These mates aren't just connected, they're cosmically intertwined. Their bond can move mountains, change weather, bring the dead back to life. He paused. Or destroy entire packs in a single night. Sarah's blood ran cold. That's not possible. Isn't it? Matthias gestured between them. You kissed a corpse and brought an alpha king back from 3 days of death. You're tethered by a bond that causes physical agony when separated. Your very presence together is making the palace crumble and wolves fall into comas. His voice dropped. You're not a normal mate pair, Sarah. You never were. You're a fated catastrophe waiting to happen. Damien's hands clenched into fists. If this is true, why didn't anyone tell us? Because the council knew. Matthias's expression turned bitter. They've known since you both came of age. There are signs. Celestial alignments, prophetic dreams, the way reality bends around catastrophe mates. The seers identified you years before you ever met. That's why they demanded the rejection, Sarah breathed. Not because of my bloodline. Because of what we were. Exactly. Matthias moved to the window, staring out at the damaged palace grounds. Your father's disgrace, Sarah? It wasn't real. The council fabricated charges of treason to destroy your family's standing. They needed you weakened, isolated, so that when the time came for Damien to reject you, the pack would accept it. Rage burned through Sarah's veins. They destroyed my family to manipulate us. They destroyed everything to prevent the prophecy. Matthias turned back to face them. There's an old text, locked away in the council's deepest vaults. It speaks of the rejected queen and death's king. When the rejected queen kisses death's king, the old world ends and shadows reign. The words echoed in the silent room. Sarah felt them settle into her bones like a curse she'd been born to carry. The old world ends, Damien repeated slowly. Meaning what? Apocalypse? Destruction? No one knows for certain. Prophecies are rarely literal. Matthias's jaw tightened. But the council wasn't willing to risk it. So they orchestrated everything. The rejection to weaken your bond. Damien's marriage to Alara to create distance. And when that wasn't enough. They killed me, Damien finished, his voice hollow. Yes. With Lunarsbane, a poison designed specifically to kill you in a way that looked natural enough not to raise immediate suspicion. Matthias's expression darkened. But they made a mistake. They underestimated how strong your bond truly was. Even with memories erased, even with 5 years of separation, even with death itself, the bond survived. Sarah's mind raced, pieces clicking into place with horrible clarity. The memorial service. They knew I would come. They counted on it. Matthias nodded grimly. The council has seers. They saw you crashing through those windows. They saw you kissing Damien's corpse. They wanted you to resurrect him. Why? Damien demanded. If they were so afraid of the prophecy, why engineer the exact scenario that would fulfill it? Because they want to study you. To weaponize you. Matthias's voice was hard. A mate bond powerful enough to resurrect the dead? That's not just rare magic, that's godlike power. Imagine what the council could do if they could control it. Harness it. They could make themselves immortal. Unstoppable. The sitting room felt suffocating. Sarah couldn't breathe. Everything she believed, about her family's disgrace, about Damien's rejection, about her own worth, it was all lies. Carefully constructed lies designed to control them. What about Alara? She asked, her voice shaking. Where does she fit in all this? Alara isn't just Damien's widow. Matthias's expression turned grim. She's a keeper witch. Sworn to the council, trained in ancient binding magic. Her job was to keep Damien contained, to prevent him from ever reconnecting with you. The pregnancy announcement? Another manipulation. She knew you'd smell the lie, knew it would create conflict. She wanted us to hate each other, Damien said. She wanted you distracted. Matthias moved closer. Because the real danger isn't your bond, it's what happens when you complete it. Sarah's heart hammered. Complete it? You brought Damien back, but the bond is only half formed. You're tethered but not truly mated. If you complete the bond, if you claim each other fully, the catastrophic power will be unleashed. Matthias's voice dropped. And that's when the prophecy will be fulfilled. The old world will end. Then we don't complete it, Sarah said immediately. We keep it half-formed. We stay tethered but never. You can't. Matthias cut her off. The bond won't allow it. It's already destroying you both. Haven't you noticed? The pain when you separate is getting worse. The pull between you is getting stronger. The bond demands completion, and the longer you resist, the more damage it will cause. Damien's face had gone ashen. The wolves falling into comas. That's us. Our incomplete bond is poisoning them. Not exactly. Matthias hesitated, and for the first time, Sarah saw fear in her uncle's eyes. The coma plague isn't a sickness. It's possession. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Possessed by what? Sarah whispered. By something ancient. Something that's been feeding on the energy your incomplete bond is radiating. Matthias pulled a small leather journal from his coat, old, worn, the pages yellowed with age. I've been researching this for years, ever since I learned what you were. There's an entity that existed before the moon goddess we worship now. An original goddess, primitive and hungry, who ruled when wolves were still savage beasts. He opened the journal to a page covered in strange symbols and faded ink drawings. The central image showed a figure, female, beautiful, but wrong. Her eyes were too large, her smile too wide, and shadows poured from her like blood. Her name was Moira. The first mother. The original moon. Matthias, you're letting her in, Matthias corrected. Every moment your bond remains incomplete, the tear widens. Moira has been sending pieces of herself through, possessing pack members, feeding on the chaotic energy you're radiating. The coma victims? They're not sick. They're hosting fragments of an ancient, corrupted goddess. The room spun. Sarah gripped the arm of the couch to steady herself. How do we stop it? That's the question, isn't it? Matthias closed the journal. You have two choices. Complete the mate bond and unleash the catastrophic power, which might seal the tear and trap Moira again, or might give her exactly what she needs to break free entirely. Or break the bond permanently, let Damien die for real, and hope that seals the tear before Moira fully manifests. Those aren't choices, Sarah said. Those are different ways to doom everyone. Welcome to being a fated catastrophe. Matthias's voice held bitter sympathy. You were never meant to have a happy ending, Sarah. You were meant to be a weapon or a sacrifice. Damien stood abruptly, crossing to the window. His shoulders were rigid with tension. There has to be another way. There isn't. Matthias's voice was final. I've spent years searching. These are your only options. Sarah watched Damien's reflection in the window glass, watched the way his jaw clenched and his hands trembled. Through the bond, she could feel his anguish, his rage, his terrible guilt. Then let me die. Damien's voice was quiet. Break the bond. Let me go back to death where I belong. No. The word tore from Sarah's throat before she could stop it. Damien turned to face her, and his eyes were full of pain. Sarah. I didn't bring you back just to let you die again. You brought me back by accident. Damien moved toward her, and the bonds sang between them. And I should have stayed dead. Everything that's happening, the coma plague, the possessed wolves, the tear in reality, it's all because of me. Because I came back. Because we're bonded, Sarah corrected. This isn't just your burden. Yes, it is. Damien knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. The touch sent heat racing through her veins, the bond demanding, always demanding. I rejected you once to save the kingdom. I can die now for the same reason. Tears burned in Sarah's eyes. You're asking me to kill you. I'm asking you to let me go. His thumbs traced circles on her palms, and the gentleness of it broke something in her chest. I love you, Sarah. I've loved you through rejection and death and resurrection. But loving you means accepting that we can't be together. That our bond is too dangerous to complete. And if breaking the bond doesn't work? Sarah's voice cracked. If letting you die doesn't seal the tear? Then you'll be gone for nothing. Then at least I'll have died protecting you one final time. Before Sarah could respond, the sitting room door burst open. Marcus stumbled in, his face pale with terror. My king, you need to see this. Now. They ran. Through corridors and downstairs, following Marcus to the medical wing. But they didn't make it that far. Halfway there, they heard the screaming. The 7 coma victims were awake. But they weren't themselves anymore. Sarah and Damien skidded to a halt in the medical wing's doorway. The scene before them was something from a nightmare. All 7 wolves were on their feet, but their movements were wrong, too fluid, too synchronized. And their eyes. Their eyes glowed with silver light that was beautiful and terrible. Hello, little catastrophe. The voice came from all 7 mouths at once, layered and echoing. We've been waiting for you. Moira, Matthias breathed behind them. The possessed wolves smiled in perfect unison. The first mother. The original moon. The hungry dark. They tilted their heads. You've made such a beautiful mess, Sarah Thorne. An incomplete bond. A resurrected king. A tear in reality wide enough for me to slip through. Release them, Damien commanded, his alpha power rolling through the words. The possessed wolves laughed. Your alpha authority means nothing to me, Death's king. I am older than your bloodline. Older than your laws. I am the chaos from which all wolves were born. What do you want? Sarah demanded. The same thing you want. Moira's smile widened across 7 faces. Completion. Fulfillment. The catastrophic union of souls that will tear down the false order my daughter created. The possessed wolves moved closer, their movements predatory. Complete your bond, Sarah. Claim your mate. Unleash the power that terrifies them all. So you can break free, Matthias said. So you can use their power to escape your prison. So I can be whole again. Moira's voice turned sharp, almost petulant. My daughter locked me away because she feared my strength. She created a sanitized version of mate bonds, neat, controlled, safe. But true love isn't safe. True connection isn't controlled. It's wild and destructive and beautiful. The possessed wolves reached toward Sarah and Damien. You feel it, don't you? The way your souls scream for each other? The way every moment apart is agony? That's real. That's true. Complete the bond and embrace what you were meant to be. We were meant to destroy each other, Sarah said. You were meant to become each other. Moira's voice turned seductive. Fated catastrophe mates don't just love, they merge. 2 souls becoming one infinite power. You could reshape reality itself. End suffering. End the corrupt council that manipulated you. You could become gods. The words wrapped around Sarah like silk and poison. She could feel the truth in them, the terrible temptation. Complete the bond. Let the power consume them. Become something more than wolf, more than mortal. But at what cost? Don't listen to her, Matthias warned. Moira's power is corruption. If you complete the bond now, you'll become vessels for her will. Or you'll become strong enough to cage me again. Moira shrugged. Either way, the choice must be made. Complete the bond or break it. But decide quickly, little catastrophe. The tear is widening, and soon I won't need your permission at all. The possessed wolves collapsed in perfect synchronization, their bodies hitting the floor like puppets with cut strings. The silver light faded from their eyes, leaving them unconscious but breathing. Sarah and Damien stared at each other across the medical wing. The bond pulled at them, demanding, always demanding. And now Sarah understood what it was demanding. Completion. Merger. Catastrophe. "We have to break it," Damien said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I know." Sarah's hands trembled. "But I don't know if I can." "You have to." Damien crossed to her, and even now, even knowing what they were, the bonds sang at his nearness. "Because loving me means destroying everything. And I can't, I won't let you make that choice. You don't get to decide for me." Sarah's voice turned hard. "You rejected me once. You don't get to do it again by dying. Then what do you want to do?" Damien's frustration bled through. Complete the bond and hope we're strong enough to contain the power? Risk becoming vessels for a corrupted goddess? Or doom the entire pack by letting Moira continue feeding on our incomplete bond? Sarah didn't have an answer. Every option led to destruction. Matthias cleared his throat. There might be a third way. They both turned to him. "What?" "The prophecy says, when the rejected queen kisses death's king, the old world ends and shadows reign." Matthias's expression was thoughtful. Everyone assumes the old world ending is a bad thing. But what if it's not? What if the old world, the corrupt council, the manipulative power structures, the fear-based hierarchy, what if that's what needs to end? "You're suggesting we fulfill the prophecy?" Sarah's voice rose. "Intentionally? I'm suggesting you stop fighting what you are." Matthias met her eyes. "You're a fated catastrophe. That power exists for a reason. Maybe instead of trying to contain it or break it, you embrace it and direct it." "That's insane," Damien said. "So is everything else that's happened." Matthias pulled out his journal again. "I've been studying this for years. Every account of fated catastrophe mates says the same thing, their power is neutral. It's the intent behind it that matters. Complete the bond with love and purpose, and you might be able to seal Moira away and destroy the systems that made you weapons in the first place. Or we might destroy everything," Sarah said. "Yes." Matthias didn't sugarcoat it. "But you're going to destroy everything anyway if you do nothing." Sarah looked at Damien. Really looked at him. The man she'd loved. The man who'd rejected her. The man who'd died and come back and still, impossibly, looked at her like she was his entire world. "It's your choice," Damien said quietly. "Whatever you decide, I'll stand with you." And that's when Sarah understood. This was her test. Not just their test. Hers. The moon goddess, the real one, not the corrupted Moira, had been orchestrating this all along. The rejection to make Sarah strong. The resurrection to give her purpose. The impossible choice to force her to become what she was always meant to be. Not a victim. Not a weapon. A queen. "I choose us," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. "I choose to complete the bond and face whatever comes." Damien's eyes widened. "Sarah. I choose you, Damien Blackthorne. Not because I have to. Not because the bond demands it. But because loving you, really loving you, means trusting that together we're stronger than any curse or prophecy or corrupted goddess." She stepped closer, and the bond flared between them like wildfire. "If we're going to end the old world," Sarah continued, "then let's make damn sure we build something better from the ashes." Damien's expression cracked, and for the first time since he'd come back to life, Sarah saw hope in his eyes. "You're sure?" "No." Sarah smiled through her tears. "But I'm done being afraid." She cupped his face in her hands and pulled him down to meet her lips. This kiss was nothing like the one in the memorial hall. That had been hate and desperation. This was choice. Intention. Love that had survived rejection and death and every manipulation the universe could throw at them. The bond exploded. Power poured through Sarah like lightning, like starlight, like every atom in her body was being rewritten. She felt Damien's soul merge with hers, felt their consciousness expand beyond their bodies, beyond the palace, beyond reality itself. The medical wing filled with silver lights so bright Matthias had to shield his eyes. The possessed wolves gasped awake, Moira's presence ripped from them as the completed bond sealed the tear in reality. The palace walls stopped crumbling. The coma plague victims opened their eyes, healed and whole. And still the power grew. Sarah could feel it reshaping her, transforming her into something new. She could feel Damien beside her, inside her, part of her now in a way that transcended flesh and bone. They were becoming something the wolf world had never seen. When the light finally faded, Sarah opened her eyes. They were still standing in the medical wing. Still themselves. But changed. She could feel the power humming beneath her skin, vast and ancient and completely under her control. Beside her, Damien's eyes glowed with the same silver-gold light, and she knew without looking that hers did too. Matthias stared at them with something like awe. "What are you?" Before either could answer, a voice whispered through the air. Not Moira's corrupted hunger. Something else. Something older and kinder and impossibly vast. Not king. Not queen. Gods. The real moon goddess. Speaking for the first time in millennia. "You passed the test, my children. You chose love over fear, unity over division. The old world has ended. Now build me something beautiful." The presence faded like morning mist. Sarah looked at Damien. He looked back. And slowly, they smiled. They were no longer just wolves. No longer just mates. They were something new. Something catastrophic. Something divine. And they had a kingdom to rebuild. Outside, dawn broke over the palace, and for the first time in 5 years, the sky was full of stars. Epilogue. 6 months later. Sarah stood on the rebuilt eastern terrace, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of amber and rose. The palace had been restored, not to what it was, but to something better. Where cold stone corridors once stood, now there were gardens that bloomed year-round. Where heavy doors once separated the Alpha's tower from the rest of the pack, now there were open archways that invited everyone in. The old world had ended. And they'd built something beautiful from its ashes. "You're up early." She felt Damien before she heard him, the bond between them as natural now as breathing. He wrapped his arms around her waist from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder, and Sarah leaned back into his warmth. "Couldn't sleep," she admitted. "Today feels important." "That's because it is." Damien pressed a kiss to her temple. "It's not every day you officially become queen." Sarah's stomach fluttered with nerves. 6 months ago, she'd been an outcast from a disgraced bloodline. Today, the entire pack would gather to witness her coronation as Damien's true mate and equal ruler. It still felt surreal. "Second thoughts?" Damien asked, reading her tension like he always did. "About you?" "Never." Sarah turned in his arms to face him. "About whether I'm ready to lead?" "Every single day." "Good." Damien smiled, and it transformed his face from handsome to devastating. "The moment you stop doubting yourself is the moment you become like the old council." The old council was gone now. After the truth about their manipulations came out, the fabricated charges against Sarah's family, the orchestrated rejection, the murder plot. The pack had risen up in fury. Marcus now led a new council, one elected by the people rather than inherited through bloodlines. It wasn't perfect, but it was better. Everything was better now. The guests started arriving last night, Damien said, pulling Sarah from her thoughts. Representatives from every major pack in the realm. They're all curious to meet the catastrophe queen. Sarah groaned. "I hate that title. I think it's fitting." Damien's eyes sparkled with mischief. You did catastrophically destroy the entire power structure of Wolf Society. We destroyed it, Sarah corrected. Together. Together, Damien agreed, his expression softening. He cupped her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. Always together. Sarah rose on her toes to kiss him, and the bond hummed with contentment. 6 months of being fully mated, and the power still thrummed between them, vast and ancient and beautiful. But they'd learned to control it, to channel it into healing rather than destruction. The catastrophe had become a miracle. Sarah. Damien. A familiar voice called from inside the palace. Stop making out and come eat breakfast before the cooks stage a revolt. They broke apart, laughing. Matthias appeared in the terrace doorway, looking healthier than Sarah had ever seen him. After the truth about her family's disgrace came out, Damien had officially pardoned the Thorn bloodline and restored their titles. Matthias now served as the royal advisor, using his years of research to help them navigate their new powers. The cooks love us, Sarah protested as they followed Matthias inside. The cooks love Damien because he compliments every meal like it's a religious experience, Matthias corrected. They tolerate you because you're mated to him. Rude but accurate, Sarah admitted. They entered the informal dining room, another change Sarah had insisted on. The old palace had been full of formal spaces that kept people at a distance. Now there were comfortable rooms where pack members could gather without ceremony. Several wolves were already there, helping themselves to the spread of food. Sarah recognized them all, former outcasts and omegas who'd been marginalized under the old system. She'd made it a point to bring them into the palace, to give them positions of real authority. "Morning, Your Majesty," called a young omega named Riley who now managed the palace kitchens. "Big day today." "Don't remind me," Sarah said, but she was smiling as she loaded her plate with eggs and fresh bread. "Is everything ready for the ceremony?" "As ready as it'll ever be." Riley grinned. "Though I heard Elder Marcus nearly had a heart attack when he saw your dress." Sarah's smile widened. "It's not that scandalous." "It's red," Matthias said flatly. "Queens wear white. Old queens wore white." Sarah bit into her toast. "I'm not an old queen." Damien laughed, the sound rich and warm. "You're going to give the traditionalists heart attacks." "Good. They could use the excitement." After breakfast, Sarah retreated to her chambers to prepare. Her rooms were connected to Damien's now, no more separation, no more pretending they were anything other than completely devoted to each other. The space was filled with light and books and the small personal touches that made it feel like home. A knock on the door made her turn. "Come in." Elara entered, and Sarah tensed reflexively. 6 months hadn't completely erased the complicated history between them. After everything came out, about the council's manipulations, about Elara's role as a keeper witch, Damien had banished her from the palace. But Sarah had asked him to reconsider. Elara had been as much a pawn as they were, sworn to serve the council's orders or face death. It didn't excuse what she'd done, but Sarah understood that monsters weren't born, they were created by systems that demanded obedience over conscience. So Elara remained at the palace, no longer a keeper witch but a healer, using her magic to help rather than control. "I brought your dress," Elara said quietly, carrying a garment bag. "The seamstress finished the final adjustments this morning." "Thank you." Sarah took the bag, and for a moment, they stood in awkward silence. "I know I've said this before," Elara began, her voice barely above a whisper, "but I need to say it again. I'm sorry. For everything. For the spell that erased your memories, for trying to keep you apart, for being too much of a coward to question the council's orders." Sarah studied her. 6 months ago, she would have wanted Elara to suffer, to hurt the way Sarah had hurt. But the bond with Damien had changed her, had shown her that holding on to hatred only poisoned yourself. "I know," Sarah said simply. "And I forgive you." Elara's eyes widened with shock. "You do? Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean what you did was okay." Sarah set the garment bag on her bed. But it means I'm choosing not to let the past control my future. We were all victims of a corrupt system, Alara. The only difference is I found a way to break free, and you didn't. Tears slid down Alara's cheeks. I don't deserve your mercy. Probably not, Sarah agreed. But I'm giving it anyway. That's what the new world looks like, mercy over judgment, growth over punishment. Alara wiped her eyes, managing a tremulous smile. You're going to be an incredible queen. I'm going to try. After Alara left, Sarah opened the garment bag and pulled out her dress. It was stunning, deep crimson silk that seemed to shimmer like liquid fire, with delicate silver embroidery that looked like stars scattered across a night sky. The design was modern and bold, nothing like the traditional white gowns queens usually wore. It was perfect. Sarah dressed carefully, her hands steady despite the nerves fluttering in her stomach. When she finally looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. Gone was the broken, rejected Omega who'd crashed through the palace windows 6 months ago. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who'd faced death and darkness and emerged transformed. You look beautiful. Sarah turned to find Damien in the doorway, and her breath caught. He wore traditional black, but his jacket was embroidered with silver thread that matched her dress. They looked like night and stars, shadow and light, perfectly complementary. You clean up nice yourself, Sarah managed. Damien crossed the room, and even after 6 months of being mated, her pulse still quickened at his approach. I have something for you. He pulled out a small velvet box and opened it. Inside was a ring, simple silver with a moonstone that seemed to glow from within. It was my mother's, Damien said softly. She died when I was young, but I remember her telling me to save this for my true mate. His voice roughened with emotion. I want you to have it. Sarah's eyes burned with tears. Damien. You gave me life, Sarah. You gave me purpose. You gave me a reason to be better than the man I was before. He took the ring from the box and held it between them. Let me give you this small thing in return. Sarah held out her hand, and Damien slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, and the moment it settled into place, she felt a pulse of warm magic, a blessing from a queen who'd never lived to see her son find happiness. She would have loved you, Damien whispered. I wish I could have met her. She's here. Damien placed Sarah's hand over his heart. Part of her lives in me, and now in you. In the bond we share. They stood like that for a long moment, foreheads pressed together, breathing in sync. Then a loud knock shattered the peace. If you two are done being disgustingly romantic, the entire pack is waiting. Marcus's voice carried through the door. Sarah and Damien exchanged glances and laughed. Ready to become a queen? Damien asked. Ready to become yours, Sarah corrected. The queen thing is just a bonus. The coronation took place in the palace's great hall, but even that massive space could barely contain the crowd. Wolves from every pack in the realm had come to witness this moment, some out of curiosity, others out of genuine respect for what Sarah and Damien represented. A new way forward. Sarah walked down the aisle on Matthias's arm, her uncle's pride evident in every step. The hall had been transformed with flowers and candles, but it was the faces she passed that struck her most. Former outcasts. Omegas. Wolves from disgraced bloodlines like hers. They looked at her with hope, with the belief that if she could rise from rejection to royalty, maybe they could too. Damien waited for her at the altar, and when their eyes met, everything else faded. The crowd, the ceremony, the weight of responsibility, none of it mattered as much as the man looking at her like she was his entire universe. The ceremony itself was traditional in some ways, revolutionary in others. Marcus performed the bonding ritual, but instead of the old words about obedience and duty, he spoke of partnership and equality. When the time came to exchange vows, Damien went first. Sarah Thorne, he said, his voice carrying through the silent hall. I rejected you once out of fear and duty. I let a corrupt system tell me you weren't worthy. His voice grew stronger. But you were always worthy. You were always more than I deserved. Today, I don't just accept you as my mate, I choose you. Every day for the rest of our lives, I choose you. Sarah's throat tightened with emotion. When it was her turn to speak, she had to take a breath to steady herself. Damien Blackthorne, you broke my heart. You let me believe I was nothing, that our bond was something to be ashamed of. She saw him flinch, but she continued. And then you died. And I kissed you not to save you, but to curse you. But that curse became our salvation. It taught me that love isn't weakness, it's the most powerful force in existence. She took his hands. Today I choose you too. Not because the bond demands it, but because you're the man I want beside me as we build a better world. Marcus placed his hands over theirs. By the power of the moon goddess and the will of this pack, I recognize you as true mates and equal rulers. Rise, Alpha King Damien Blackthorne. Rise, Alpha Queen Sarah Blackthorne. The hall erupted in cheers. Damien pulled Sarah close and kissed her, and the bond flared between them, brilliant and beautiful and completely under their control. Around them, the air shimmered with silver light, and for just a moment, everyone in the hall could feel what Sarah and Damien felt, the pure, infinite possibility of their love. When they finally broke apart, Sarah turned to face the pack. Her pack now. Her people. The old world taught us that strength comes from control, from hierarchy, from keeping others down so we could rise up, she said, her voice ringing through the hall. But we've learned different. Real strength comes from lifting each other up. From choosing compassion over cruelty. From building systems that serve everyone, not just the powerful. She looked at Damien, and he nodded encouragingly. We're not perfect, Sarah continued. We're going to make mistakes. But we promise to listen when you tell us we're wrong. We promise to be leaders who serve rather than rule. And we promise that no one in this pack will ever be told they're not worthy again. The cheers were deafening. The celebration lasted well into the night. The palace grounds filled with music and dancing and laughter, sounds that had been absent for too long. Sarah moved through the crowd with Damien at her side, greeting guests and sharing their joy. She found Riley dancing with a young beta male, both of them glowing with happiness. She spotted Matthias deep in conversation with a visiting scholar, probably discussing some obscure bit of magic history. Even Alara was there, standing at the edge of the crowd, watching the festivities with something like wistfulness. Sarah excused herself from a conversation with an elderly alpha and made her way to Alara. You should be dancing, Sarah said. Alara startled. I didn't think I'd be welcome. You're part of this pack now. Sarah gestured to the celebration. That means you're welcome. I don't know how to be part of something without trying to control it, Alara admitted quietly. The council trained that into me from childhood. Then learn. Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. We're all learning how to be better. You're not alone in that. Alara's eyes glistened. Thank you, my queen. Just Sarah, she corrected. I think we've had enough of unnecessary formality. As Sarah walked away, she felt Damien's presence through the bond. He was on the other side of the grounds, talking with visiting alphas about trade agreements and alliances. The bond let her feel his contentment, his pride in what they'd built together. Having fun? She sent through their mental link, still marveling that they could do this now. Missing you, Damien responded. How much longer do we have to stay at our own party? At least another hour. Then we can escape. I'm counting the minutes. Sarah smiled and continued making her rounds. She talked with young wolves who dreamed of becoming scholars instead of warriors. She listened to Omegas share ideas for new pack programs. She laughed with elders who admitted they'd been wrong to support the old council's ways. This was what power was supposed to feel like. Not domination, but connection. Not control, but community. As the moon rose high overhead, Sarah finally found her way back to Damien. He was alone now, standing at the edge of the garden, looking up at the stars. Hey, she said softly, slipping her hand into his. Hey yourself, my queen. Damien pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder. Happy? Deliriously. Sarah breathed in his scent, pine and smoke and home. Are you? More than I ever thought possible. Damien pressed a kiss to her hair. 6 months ago, I was dead. Now I'm married to my true mate, leading a pack that's finally healing, and planning a future I never dared to dream of. What future is that? One where we grow old together. Where we have pups who never know what it's like to be told they're not good enough. Where we build something that lasts not because we forced it to, but because we nurtured it. Damien pulled back to look at her. A future where every day I get to wake up beside you and remember that I'm the luckiest male alive. Sarah's heart swelled. Pups. You want children? Eventually. Maybe. Damien's cheeks colored. If you do. No pressure. I think I'd like that, Sarah said slowly. Someday. When we're ready. Then someday it is. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the celebration continue around them. Sarah thought about everything that had led to this moment, the rejection that had broken her, the resurrection that had saved them, the prophecy that had nearly destroyed them. Every painful step had been necessary to bring them here. Do you think she's watching? Sarah asked. The moon goddess? Probably. Damien's voice held amusement. She went to a lot of trouble orchestrating all this. I doubt she'd miss the finale. As if in response, the moonlight suddenly grew brighter, bathing them in silver radiance. And for just a moment, Sarah felt something, a presence, ancient and vast and infinitely kind. A blessing. An approval. A mother watching her children finally find their way home. Then it faded, leaving just Sarah and Damien standing in the garden, surrounded by their pack, their people, their family. I love you, Sarah whispered. I love you too, Damien replied. My queen. My mate. My Sarah. They kissed under the moonlight, and somewhere in the distance, wolves howled their joy to the stars. The old world had ended in fire and pain and transformation. But the new world they'd built from its ashes? It was beautiful. 1 year later. Sarah stood in the palace gardens, one hand resting on her rounded belly, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold. Damien was beside her, his hand covering hers, both of them feeling their daughter kick and tumble inside. She's going to be trouble, Damien said with obvious pride. She's going to be loved, Sarah corrected. That's all that matters. Around them, the pack was gathering for the evening meal, an open celebration they held every week where anyone could come and share food and stories. It was loud and chaotic and absolutely perfect. Riley ran past, chasing a group of pups through the garden. Matthias sat on a bench with the new council members, debating some political issue with animated hand gestures. Even Alara was there, helping to set up tables, her movements tentative but genuine. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd never crashed through those windows? Damien asked. Sarah considered. Sometimes. But then I remember, that kiss didn't create what we have. It just revealed it. The bond was always there, waiting. We would have found our way to each other eventually. You think so? I know so. Sarah turned to face him fully. Some loves are too strong to be killed by rejection or death or corrupt goddesses. Some loves are catastrophic in the best way possible, they destroy what needs to be destroyed and build something better in its place. Damien cupped her face, his expression infinitely tender. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You were just too stubborn to notice. They laughed, and their daughter kicked again, as if celebrating with them. In the distance, the pack's howl rose up, a sound of joy and unity and hope. The catastrophe queen and death's king had become something the wolf world had never seen. Not gods, despite what the ancient voice had whispered. Just two souls who'd chosen each other over and over, who'd turned their pain into purpose, who'd proven that even the darkest prophecy could become a blessing. And as the last light of day faded and the first stars appeared, Sarah knew with absolute certainty. This was only the beginning. The end. Thank you for listening to this story. Like, share and subscribe for more.